Okay, moving on to the next segment of today's show. You guys remember that on last Monday's episode, I started a new segment in which I will be going over a different NFL division every episode, and I'll be recapping that team's draft, as well as after I recap all four teams' drafts, at the end, I will give the current state of all four teams in that division. And on Monday's show, we did the AFC West, or the AFC South, excuse me. We went over the Colts, Jaguars, Titans, and Texans. And for today's show, we are going to recap the NFC West. And the first team's draft I want to talk about today is the San Francisco 49ers. And there were really three players that they drafted that I think are going to have a significant impact. And I think the 49ers had an interesting draft because when you looked at the San Francisco team going into this week, the one position you thought that they really had to address is wide receiver. And we all remember in the Super Bowl, Jimmy Garoppolo literally missed Emmanuel Sanders by a split second. If he hits that throw, odds are the San Francisco 49ers are Super Bowl champions. And while some of that blame for losing that Super Bowl could go on the quarterback, I do think if the 49ers had a little bit more better receiving options besides Deebo Samuel, they have a great tight end in George Kittle, they could have definitely used that to their advantage and drafted one. Also, the 49ers had an extra first-round pick because they traded with the Indianapolis Colts as they sent defensive end DeForest Buckner to the Indianapolis Colts for the number 14th pick in the NFL draft. So the 49ers had picked 13 and 31 going into this draft, and they didn't exactly stay at 31 as they moved up to trade back to 14 and then up to 25. And that was the first thing when I look at this 49ers draft I'm really going to give John Lynch credit for, was that when you looked at where the San Francisco 49ers picked, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers decided that they wanted to trade up to pick number 13 to get Tristan Wirfs, the offensive tackle from the University of Iowa, who they were just shocked was off the board, and was still on the board. And we all know that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are a team that really needs some offensive line help. So the 49ers were like, all right, you're not going to take the guy we want anyway, so we'll trade back. And they ended up taking Javon Kinlaw, the nose tackle from the University of South Carolina. And at first, I didn't love the pick, but then the more I looked at it, I just said, okay, they're going to replace DeForest Buckner on that defensive line. They have the open spot anyway, and if they're going to roll with a defensive line of Armstead, Solomon Thomas, who was a former top 5 pick, hasn't really been everything the 49ers have expected, but he's still been pretty solid, along with Kinlaw and Nick Bosa. That is a dominant unit for years to come. They have Alexander, Warner, and Greenlaw as linebackers, 3 guys that are pretty good. I think their secondary could have definitely been improved a little more. Richard Sherman is a little older. They have Tart and Ward as safeties. Ahkello Witherspoon currently sits as the second corner, so I think corner in particular could have definitely been a position they could have upgraded, but at the same time, they draft Javon Kinlaw to add to a nasty defensive line, and with their second first-round pick, they actually traded up and took wide receiver from Arizona State University, Brandon Ayuk, and I think that was a really good fit. You pair him with Deebo Samuel. They also traded Marquise Goodwin and Matt Breida. So that's another thing about the 49ers draft, is that they actually made some moves as well, getting rid of 2 weapons, Breida to Miami, Goodwin to Philadelphia. So they're going to really have to rely on Travis Benjamin and Richie James. James is a dynamic playmaking receiver, especially in space. Dante Pettis as well. So it's going to be interesting to see, led by Samuel and Ayuk, if they're going to be good enough for the 49ers in order to lead their receiving corps in 2020 and help out Jimmy Garoppolo. The other guy they drafted is guard from West Virginia at number 153 overall, Colton McKevitz. And I think this was a pretty solid pick, especially where they got him, because interior offensive line was definitely a need. They also traded for Trent Williams. He's going to be replacing Joe Staley. He's a guy that didn't even step on the field last year. So I'm going to be curious to see how that break looks for him. They have Mike McGlinchey on the offensive line as well, so really they needed to fill the interior with their tackles being already taken care of. So I think hopefully McKevitz will be a solid move. My final grade for this 49er draft is a flat B. Personally, would I have taken Javon Kinlaw at number 14 overall? No, I probably would have went secondary or maybe even wide receiver as Lamb, Judy, and Lamb and Judy, not Ruggs, were both still on the board. But they ended up going Kinlaw in round 1, and the 49ers and John Lynch really started to use the approach of, okay, this is a very deep wide receiver draft. We have the extra first-round pick anyway. We'll take the guy we like in Kinlaw and then move on to Ayuk because we'll get value with him, as San Francisco ended up trading up and getting him. So my grade overall for the 49ers draft is a B. I like that they addressed wide receiver. I like Kinlaw as a player, but didn't love that they spent the number 14 overall pick on him. And I think McKevitz is good, as they needed a guard. So I'm going to give the 49ers a flat B for their 2020 draft.